Hello, Facebook Live. This is Frank Washkuch from PRWeek. I'm here with Dan Zacchei for this week's podcast. He's an MD based in New York at Sloane Company, and Diana Bradley is with us, as always. So we are about to kick this thing off as soon as Perry, the man behind the controls, tells us we are ready and we can start recording. So, Perry, all eyes on you. No pressure. All right. So, other thing. Good thing we're not broadcasting this on Facebook Live or anything. Can you just flip this on really quickly? Thanks. You guys could banter about Connecticut and the Trumbull Mall and whatnot.
It's quite a mall.
While I struggle to get this to work.
Two different worlds.
Oh, come on. Yeah. It's like this big. Okay, so let's get started. We'll start in 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PR Week. That's PR Week's weekly podcast on everything going on in the worlds of PR and communications. My name is Frank Washkuch. I'm the news editor of PR Week, and I have a great guest for you this week. It is Dan Zacchei from Sloane Company. Dan, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And here with us, as always, is Diana Bradley, our senior reporter.
Hello.
Hi, how are you, Diana?
I'm great, thank you.
All right, so we're going to talk about a few things that fall under your expertise, Dan, whether that's working with companies that might be concerned about a certain Twitter account, and we'll be talking about some issues with the Puerto Rico debt crisis, and the M&A environment in general. A lot of these things in the news right now, and Diana's going to give us a rundown on the big things happening in PR and communications news this week after that. So the Trump tweets, let's just jump right into this. This is something that even before he was in office, there was a great Bloomberg article about it, I remember, about how companies were suddenly just kind of quaking at this idea that the president might tweet at them at any given moment and what to do. I'm sure that clients have asked you about it. What's the first rule of thumb that you tell them?
The first rule of thumb, I guess, is try to avoid it happening to you,
okay,
to whatever degree possible. But look, I think that there's been an interesting evolution from the kind of period you were talking about when companies were quote-unquote quaking, worrying about this. I think companies have realized now that from a valuation perspective, stock market perspective, Trump saying something negative about you is not the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think where it's really become something that people are paying attention to is how it plays into the media cycle. Because the reality is, the minute that he singles out a company or singles out an issue or attacks an industry, that's going to just really explode the level of media attention and coverage around it. So in some ways, you're more worried about the hijacking of the narrative and the hijacking of the press than you are about the policy implications of him coming after you.
When do you think the tide turned in terms of everybody worrying about it so much to it being not such a huge deal anymore? I feel like it was Nordstrom.
Yeah, that might have been it. I mean, I think also, we're living in a time that's very interesting from a PR perspective for a company, right? Because a lot of times the thing that is going to play the best with a company's customer base and really play the best on social media may be the thing that plays the worst with the guy in the White House. So I think as people started to understand that, his views on things were not necessarily the views of everyone, and certainly not every customer or investor or even other policymakers who are very powerful, that changed things a little bit.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned before the first piece of advice is try to avoid getting in the crosshairs, so to speak. How do you do that? How do you avoid it?
Look, I don't know if you can that much. I mean, if you're a company and you really stand for something and you really believe in something or you're involved in something, I don't think that you necessarily want to have that be influenced by someone's Twitter account, even if it is the theoretically most powerful person in the country. Mm-hmm. But you certainly don't want to employ a communication strategy that's going to necessarily get an undue spotlight from the administration. I mean, I think that's a general rule when it comes to dealing with DC and regulators anyway. Mm-hmm. But now it's just taken on a new dynamic, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so back to December 2017, where we are now. When you talk about the way that he can kind of hijack a news cycle with tweeting and how that can affect a company, can you go into a little bit more depth on that?
Yeah, sure. So one thing I've been working on for a while now, almost 3 years, is representing some of the key companies involved in the Puerto Rico debt crisis.
Okay.
And it's a super complicated issue with tons of stakeholders, everyone from the bondholders to the the politicians who are very vocal on it, to of course citizens there who haven't had power for however many months now. And he gets interviewed on Geraldo and basically says, yeah, we're going to wipe out all that debt. Don't think too long about the fact that that's not constitutionally or legally possible. But it doesn't really matter. And then he starts tweeting on it. And from a media perspective, if you're a reporter who's assigned to cover the Puerto Rican debt crisis, or you're assigned to cover drug pricing, or you're assigned to cover the opioid crisis, when he starts zeroing in on that, it's really an interesting moment because your editor very quickly says to you, okay, this is a bigger story. It's a general interest story now to some degree. It's a political story. Get on that. So as a PR representative or counselor or advisor, whatever you want to say, it puts you in an interesting position because you're kind of being asked to comment in some ways on the accuracy and credibility of the administration. Yeah. And if they're saying something that is going to almost always drive down the stock price, or in the case I'm talking about, the price of bonds plummeted when he made this really offhanded comment, it's interesting. And people are saying, okay, I comment on that, or go on background and talk about that. And you kind of have to remind reporters who are caught up in the moment that not everything the administration has said has necessarily come to pass, whether that's casually referring them back to something like, I don't know, the wall with Mexico or healthcare reform being destroyed. And at the same time, you're trying to make sure that the strategy you're employing and your normal media relations work isn't going to result in having your phone tapped.
Okay. And so it sounds like sort of trying to remain above the fray.
Yeah, I think that's right. And you just want to be thoughtful about it. You want to remain above the fray, and you want to make sure that you're separately addressing things with constituencies that do matter. Yeah. So if it's causing a big issue, if it's getting a lot of press attention, make sure you're talking to your employees. Make sure they understand, look, regardless of what your political views are, this is where we are as a company. This is where we are, as a management team. And we're certainly engaging with policymakers, and we're thinking about this, but, this view doesn't necessarily reflect where we're going. And if it's your investors, if it's your customers, I think it goes back to the fact that a lot of times, even when you can't control everything that's being said in the media, particularly when it's being driven from a political angle, you can control how you directly communicate with your other audiences.
Are you surprised that the Puerto Rico story in general has fallen out of the news cycle as much as it has over the past few months?
No, I mean... No? It really got thrown into the news cycle in a new way when there was this whole scandal around a contract with a power company who had some ties to the administration potentially, and that was really the first time in a while that it was quote unquote front page news, and that it was getting the full on editorial treatment. But look, any issue that is in the news for a long time and sort of straddles that line between being a financial issue and a policy issue, it's hard for that to stay front and center with the press, beyond the folks who are just doing nothing but covering that every day and are absolutely dedicated to that in the media. And I think it's somewhat reflective of today's media world, right? Where if things aren't affecting people in the moment, in their daily lives, and they're kind of moving a little bit slower and they're complicated, it's harder for people to really care about it every single day, as opposed to the news of the moment or the news of the hour.
And speaking of the news of the hour or the news of the day, you also have some expertise when it comes to mergers and acquisitions, things like that. How would you talk about the regulatory environment in the Trump era?
Well, look, I think that the recent situations that are going on with the large deals, and I'm a little precluded from talking too much here since we're actively working on something that is pretty in the news. But you just have to be constantly factoring that in. And again, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of one tweet or one comment from the administration kind of hijacking the news cycle. And I think that everyone has sort of understood that when you're communicating with regulators and you're communicating publicly, you can't predict the reactions as much as you used to be able to.
Yeah.
There's just not, necessarily an A, B, C sort of unfolding of events like there may have been under past administrations where you say, okay, this is a Republican administration, everyone's going to be fairly pro-business, everyone's going to support this deal, or this is a really left-leaning administration, this type of deal is going to have a lot of problems. It just isn't that simple anymore.
Okay, so with something like Time Warner, for instance, the Time Warner a deal that has been held up, and there's a lot of speculation that it's because of CNN. That sounds like something that's completely unprecedented, at least in terms of you wouldn't have seen an administration step in a way like this before, right?
I think so. I mean, it certainly poses a really interesting challenge from a communications perspective because you've got to have such a good and comprehensive PR plan and public affairs plan and investor relations plan. You've got to be really thinking the whole time about all of those audiences. You've got to be sensitive to doing something that could be used against you in the actual, legal aspect of the case. Because ultimately, even though there's such a circus around these deals, once the administration gets involved, these are legal issues. And you've got to keep all of that in mind at all times. And again, this is stuff that is that is new in terms of having all of that be elements you're considering, and then recognizing that, there could be a voice from the administration who comes in at any moment and opines and sets everything in a whole different track when it comes to the press.
Right. So the market is doing great. The market's up big. What does that mean for you guys? I mean, has that changed the game in any way for a company that does a lot of financial communications, a lot of corporate? I mean, are you seeing increased business? Are you seeing clients worried about different things?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, activity's good, right? M&A activity is good. We represent a lot. We do a lot in the activist investor space. So people feeling like there's opportunity to shake things up and push for deals, and spend. And investors feeling like there's money. They have money to spend in terms of launching proxy campaigns. That's all great. We had an awesome year in 2008. There were a lot of companies that were undergoing transformational moments and that were having major issues and that needed a crisis firm. So while I would say that a good market is always good for a firm like ours, there's opportunity with crisis.
Sure. Okay, so I get about 6 news alerts a day about Bitcoin now, and I know nothing whatsoever about Bitcoin. If you were talking to somebody like me and I was a client of yours, how would you explain it to me?
Wow.
$1 million question.
I think I would tell you to really dig deep and think about your personal appetite for risk.
Okay.
And, look, I think that we certainly have some investor clients who are very interested in the idea of those currencies and are really focused on understanding, not only how they can utilize those, the intention around that to make money, but how can I use this as an opportunity for me to maybe be an expert and get out there in the press. If I knew where that was going to go, then I probably would hang up my hat as a PR practitioner and join those investors making really bold bets on it. But
sure.
I can tell you that it's certainly not something that's going to fall out of the public eye or the media anytime soon.
That's interesting stuff. So another thing that you mentioned before that you've worked on is communications around the opioid crisis. Tell us a little bit about that and where you've done that.
Yeah, without getting into specifics, I think it's difficult with something like that because it's such an emotional issue, and with good reason. I mean, it's one of the, 2 or 3 major catastrophes and crises facing our country right now. Certainly not an easy answer to it. And as a company, you have to really strike the balance between being compassionate and considerate for individuals and people who have been affected by this, while at the same time, if you're facing litigation or if it's impacting your share price, you've got to fight for yourself. And if you believe that you have a story to tell, you've got to tell that story aggressively. So again, it's really balancing on a knife's edge, but it requires just being very thoughtful, being very strategic, understanding at all times that you have to work within the confines of being in a litigation situation. And again, policymakers and the administration are very, very focused on this.
And you're talking about from the pharma POV, right?
Pharma, distributors, even hospitals now are starting to get involved in this. I think that anyone who's within the entire supply chain on this issue has a lot to lose and a lot to really think about. But I do certainly think that there are opportunities for companies to differentiate themselves by being honest and credible and, compassionate while still aggressively fighting for what they believe are the facts and their right to really tell them.
Well, what's your sense of the treatment or prevention or addiction campaigns that are running out there? I mean, do you think they've been effective so far? Do you see room for improvement?
I think there's definitely room for improvement. I think there's definitely room for corporations and policymakers to work more closely together.
Okay.
I was involved last year in a couple of campaigns for a company who, has really stepped up in a way to be involved in a number of these drug take-back campaigns where they provide a safe and effective venue for people to dispose of unused opioids. So they're not just sitting in your
Right.
in your medicine cabinet waiting for someone to do something stupid with them. And I think that what was effective about that and the rollout around that was really that it was presented as a unified effort between the private and public sectors. So I think that's where people have to go. I think that these campaigns increasingly need to be less about painting one group as villains or sort of shrilly fighting back and forth, and more about figuring out ways to collaborate and be effective and make it less about who's at fault and more about a solution.
Mm-hmm. So one thing I've noticed is that, if you watch enough basketball in the New York area, you see
I watch a lot of basketball.
But you see
yeah.
the New Jersey anti-addiction campaign a lot. I mean, quite a bit. And around Thanksgiving, I spent a fair amount of time in the Midwest. And I was actually surprised that you didn't quite see the same level of advertising in states like Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania that you've seen in New Jersey so far. Do you think that campaign has been effective? It's a good model? It's a bad model?
Well, as a quick aside, I mean, I'm a pretty big NBA fan, so I get this thing called League Pass.
Are you Knicks or Nets?
I'm a Celtics fan.
You're
actually.
a Celtics fan.
As we discussed, I grew up like in the halfway, twilight
Okay.
zone between New York and Boston, which is really, a whole other podcast. But
It really is.
But
yeah.
you actually get the live feeds from all the different local channels. So.
Okay.
You're right. If you're looking at, Oklahoma City Thunder play someone else, you're not going to see any ads about that. You're really just going to see ads for fracking, fast food, and God.
Yeah.
And, that may just be the dominant advertisers in that market. I do think that what New Jersey's done and the aggressiveness which they've done it is interesting. Have they been effective or not? How effective have they been? I don't know. People are going to have to look at the data and really see if the markets that are putting more effort towards that type of thing are seeing impact.
Interesting stuff, Dan. Thanks for that. And I also want to wish Gordon Hayward a quick recovery while you're here. Okay, over to you, Diana, for the PR news of the week.
Sure. So there's been a few acquisitions.
Three
this
and
week.
one announced in one day.
Yes.
All of digital firms. Interesting stuff.
Weber Shandwick acquired Resolute Digital and Bomoda to expand its global data science, analytics, search, and performance marketing capabilities. Both Resolute and Bomoda will retain their brands, and the acquisitions will combine Weber's expertise in PR, earned media, and integrated marketing with new capabilities in data and analytics.
I think the Bomoda one is really interesting, just because of how much work they do with social media in China, which is a whole different world.
They're going to give Weber and its clients a sense of what the influencer landscape looks like in the Chinese market. So
Interesting
pretty
stuff.
interesting.
And one other one.
Stagwell Group has bought independent digital marketing firm Forward 3D in its 16th acquisition since Mark Penn founded the holding company in 2015.
So they've been busy.
Yep, and Forward 3D Group specializes in performance marketing, where clients pay only when a specific result has been achieved, such as a click from a search ad to a website or when a display ad drove a sale.
Yeah, interesting
So,
stuff, and two interesting buys by Weber there. Obviously looking to strengthen digital and analytics chops, and it's the first deal they have done since I think Flipside. I want to say it was last September, October, right?
Yeah, last September. Yep.
And they did Revive Health before that. So interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting to see how they kind of mold this into MediaCo and how else they do it. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, and some PR Week news from you too.
Yes. So PR Week's Hall of Fame has some new members. Now Pam Edstrom, co-founder of We Communications, Muriel Fox, who is an EVP of Carl Bayer and Associates, and she also co-founded the National Organization for Women.
And she was sitting at our table.
She was.
Yes. She has a lot of spirit at. I won't say her age on the air, but she has a lot of fight, and she's a very interesting person.
She is, and much deserved new member of our Hall of Fame.
Yes.
Bill Heyman, President and CEO of Heyman Associates, Kim Hunter, CEO of LeGrant, Xenia Muka, Disney's CCO, and Howard Rubenstein, who's chairman of Rubenstein, have been inducted. And
it's a good group.
it was,
It's a good group. I mean, if you just think about Howard Rubenstein just in and of itself, he's almost like a Hall of Fame class just as one person and what he's been able to accomplish.
Yeah.
Not
and
to take away from anybody else, but...
Yeah, and it was really interesting. He had a message for the PR industry that, everybody should continue to be ethical and honest.
There was some subtweeting going on from the podium, as the kids say, this year, wasn't there? You know, a few shots at the White House press secretary and the predecessor there, wasn't there?
I didn't see that.
Well, that's why it's a subtweet.
Right.
You know,
yes.
because it wasn't too overt, but there was some talk there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
And it was also an emotional evening. Pam Edstrom passed away earlier this year, and 11 of her family members were there at the event. So that was very nice, and it was really cool to see a tribute from Bill Gates.
It was
for her
and Ballmer.
Yep, and Ballmer, and she'd been working with them since Microsoft was like a penniless
And it was amazing
startup.
to see these old pictures of her from the real early days of Microsoft and the real early days of Wagner Edstrom, which is the predecessor to WE, and really, really interesting stuff. She's definitely missed. If you talk to folks out in the industry, she's definitely missed.
Definitely. But yeah, it was a great evening. I almost died eating crab cake.
Yes.
On my plate. Didn't know that was on my plate, but I survived, and it was a win.
And you're still here.
I'm still here. I'm allergic to shellfish. Other PR Week news. Should I go into the rest?
Of course.
Okay. The awards shortlist is up. The PR Week U.S. Awards for 2018. Weber Shandwick has been shortlisted for its 4th straight Large Agency of the Year award among its 12 mentions. Ketchum has been shortlisted 13 times, Edelman 9 times, and Golan 7. So you can go to our website to see the full list.
Right, and the award show is in March.
Yes, it's in March. The PR, should I just go into
Yeah, go ahead.
The PR Council.
Keep rolling.
The PR Council has named 12 rising communications leaders to its shadow board, PRC Next. The industry group has named members from a broad range of firms, from large international agencies to boutiques and specialist shops.
I'm really big on this announcement. I think this is a terrific idea.
Yeah.
And, well, you tell us a little more about it, I'll tell you why.
Sure.
And then I'll stop rudely interrupting you.
That's
So go
totally
ahead.
fine. Feel free. PRC Next board members are Rebecca Ballard. I always say her name wrong. So you say
I'm
it?
sure she's not listening. Don't worry.
MD and Head of Communications and Culture at Hill & Knowlton Strategies. Franny Chung, VP and Group Manager at M-Booth. Katie Creaser, SVP at Effect. Jen DeBerge, Director at O'Malley Hanson Communications. Jennifer Dingman, VP of Platform Strategy at Current Marketing. Dwayna Haley, VP at Porter Novelli, and Mel Hawk, SVP and Group Planning Director at Edelman.
So a couple thoughts about this. First of all, 10 of the 12 are women.
Yes.
Which is interesting because I think it's very reflective of where the industry is at, especially at a younger level, so to speak. It's, but I think that the more that you talk to people who were in the, let's say, the first 5, 6, 7 years working in communications, and tell me if you have a different experience or the same experience. But when you talk to folks straight out of school, they have a totally different idea of what they can accomplish at a PR firm, what an agency should be doing. And when I was adjuncting, I mean, the people who had worked at agencies, who were in the class, were always, you would try to teach peso as this is what paid is, this is what earned is, and they would kind of almost shrug at it in terms of, well, I mean, I know what my agency does, and they do some earned, and they do social, and they do this, so what's the big deal, you know? So I think that the younger people who are coming up right now have a totally different perspective on things. I think they have a really interesting experience with the agency life, and I think it's terrific for them to bring in a lot of young rising stars and have the PR Council board getting advice from them or just getting their own experiences. I don't know, maybe you have a similar experience working with the younger folks at your firm, or?
Yeah, look, I think that it's an interesting dynamic because you're going to learn a lot from people who are coming in and thinking about things differently and communicating differently than you were when you were that age.
Yeah.
And in our experience, the biggest thing that we figured out is you got to listen. You got to listen to what they know and how they think about things. And I think it's great anytime you can get sort of one generation to be actively listening to another and sort of promoting it in this way.
Yeah, I remember when I was teaching, I had to have students explain to me how Snapchat works and why you would actually market on Snapchat if it's just going to disappear in a few hours and things of that nature. Because I'm not a native to it. I just don't understand it at the same level that they do. And I think it's a terrific idea by PR Council on this one. All right, folks, that's about all the time we have this week. Dan, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. And Diana, thank you for giving us a rundown of the news as always.
Thank you.
I'm Perry. Thank you for being the man behind the scenes. Okay, thanks again. This is Frank Washkuch for the PR Week, and we will see you again next week. Thanks.